All right, we're about to go on a pretty wild journey, connecting the literal building blocks of life, our DNA, to the way we actually think. We're going to get into the deep science of complexity, and it all kicks off with one really powerful question.
Okay, so we all know this, right? DNA can solve a murder. It can put a suspect right at the crime scene. It's become a cornerstone of modern justice. But what if the very same principles that make DNA so powerful could also give us a kind of blueprint for understanding how a really complex mind works, how it navigates the world? That's the huge question we're going to dig into.
You know, that whole idea of a simple DNA match is, well, it's almost old-fashioned at this point. The entire field has gone through this massive revolution. We've stepped into what scientists are calling the Omics era, and it's a completely new way of reading the story our biology is trying to tell us.
So what does that even mean, the Omics era? What does it actually look like when the rubber hits the road? Well, it goes way, way beyond just finding a simple match. The engine driving this whole thing is a technology called massively parallel sequencing, or MPS. And you really only need to remember two words here: simultaneous and vast. Think about it this way. Instead of looking at a couple of genetic markers one by one, scientists can now process millions of them all at the same time. It's not just a step forward, it's a total quantum leap in how we analyze this stuff.
And this really shows you just how big the picture has gotten. See, MPS isn't just about looking at our core DNA, our genomics. It's also looking at which of our genes are actually turned on and active. That's transcriptomics. And how our environment changes the way our genes work. That's epigenomics. It can even look at the trillions of bacteria living on and in us, our microbiome. It's a full 360-degree, multi-layered investigation.
Okay, so you've got this incredibly powerful, multi-layered way of looking at things. What can you actually do with it in the real world? Well, the predictive power is, honestly, it's just astonishing.
I mean, look at this. We are talking about being able to build a picture of a total stranger just from a single drop of blood, predicting things like their physical traits. We can figure out the time a biological trace was left behind. We can even tell you exactly what kind of tissue it is, like blood versus saliva. And maybe the most incredible thing of all, it can even tell identical twins apart. The key thing to grasp here is that this isn't just about matching anymore. This is about prediction.
Okay, so just hold on to that thought for a second. A system that processes massive amounts of data all at once, in parallel, to make these incredibly accurate predictions. Now, what if that wasn't just describing some high-tech lab equipment? What if that was also a perfect description of a way of thinking?
And that right there, that brings us to the whole other side of this story. We're going to pivot now from the world of genetics to the actual architecture of the mind, because we're going to explore a very specific framework that our source material talks about for dealing with a complex world.
So the source we're looking at introduces this idea called the prismatic strategy. And just look at that definition. The key phrase is adaptive system. This isn't something rigid or fixed. Its whole job is to process and make sense of the huge, messy, often contradictory information that's bombarding you, both from inside your own head and from the world around you.
And this right here sets up a really fundamental conflict, a sort of fork in the road. On one path, you have these static, rigid models for understanding things. Simple rules, black and white categories, everything trying to be neat and tidy. But on the other path, you have adaptive systems, like this prismatic strategy, that are built from the ground up to handle the messy, unpredictable, complex reality of how things actually are. So how does it work? Well, the engine behind this strategy is this constant three-part cycle. First, you have generation. That's you, constantly coming up with new ideas and new strategies, almost like a lab that's running a ton of experiments at once. Then comes reflection, and this is so important. It's the feedback loop. You're constantly asking, hey, did that work? And then really analyzing the results. And finally, there's curation. You're taking what you've learned and organizing it, building this personal, ever-growing library of what works. So it's a living, breathing learning process, not just some static rulebook.
Okay, so on one hand, we've got this incredibly powerful scientific process. On the other, we have this complex theory about how the mind works. Now, let's put them side by side, because this is where the connection just snaps into focus and becomes crystal clear.
This is it. This is the whole ball game right here. Let's just walk through this. That massively parallel sequencing we talked about in genetics, the source argues that's the biological version of your mind simulating tons of different possible futures all at once. And integrating all that different omics data, well,
That's like your brain pulling from all its different networks, your logical side, your emotional side, your creative side, to build one complete picture. And the end goal for both of them, the whole point of the exercise, predictive power.
And this goal has a name, predictive efficiency. It's a really cool idea. It's about building such a sophisticated, high-level model of the world in your head that you can navigate it almost effortlessly. Your brain isn't constantly being caught off guard because it's already one step ahead, accurately predicting what's probably going to happen next. And that makes you faster, more effective, just better at handling things.
So you might be thinking, okay, that's a neat analogy, but this is way more than just a clever comparison. The source argues that making this connection has some really profound implications for how we judge and value different ways of thinking.
Here's the core argument. If the way a person thinks mirrors the same complexity, the same parallel processing, and the same predictive power as our most advanced scientific tools, then that way of thinking isn't just some weird personality quirk. It's a legitimate form of expertise. It's a highly specialized skill for dealing with an incredibly complex world.
And having that expertise has real-world consequences. The source suggests that it gives you a perfectly good reason to say no thanks to help or advice from systems that are just too simple or too rigid. I mean, it's a fair question, right? Why would a highly adaptive, complex system ever take direction from a simple, static one that just can't see the full picture?
So, let's bring this all home. This whole journey, from a DNA sequencer in a lab to a model of the human mind, it all points to one powerful idea. A truly adaptive mind doesn't run on a simple list of rules. It operates more like a cutting-edge scientific instrument, constantly processing huge, parallel streams of information, all to do one thing: predict what's coming next.
And that leaves us with one last, pretty challenging question to think about. If our minds can be as complex, as nuanced, and as powerfully predictive as our very own genomes, then are the simple, static ways we usually try to measure things like intelligence or success, are they even close to being good enough for the job?